think finger pointing doesn't serve a purpose. My philosophy, which our team follows, but we also recommend our customers to follow, is that you need to believe that the ball is always in your court.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Project Flux. This week we have got, as well as the weekly news, we've got an interview with Sri from Rocketlane, who are project management software, professional services automation software, and he's going to tell us all about what Rocketlane are up to. But before that, just a big shout out to our sponsor. As ever, thank you so much to Construct AI, who proudly sponsors us, and we will always have the link to Construct AI in the show notes, so do check it out. It's got a free tier that you can use, and they're always adding new features. So the big news this week has been the long-awaited arrival of ChatGPT Search, and it is called ChatGPT Search rather than the long-rumoured Search GPT, which frankly sounded a bit naff. So what's your first opinion, Yoshi?
Yeah, so I didn't see there being much logic in it being called, Search GPT, and I think putting it into ChatGPT was a much better idea. However, what I would say is the execution seems a little bit fragmented because they've now implemented, GPT Canvas, they've got the O1 model, they've also now got the search functionality. When you come to use those different things, they're not quite interoperable. So let's say, for instance, you're using the new search facility or the new search function. If you then try to upload a document or do some other capability, it's usually blacked out. It won't let you do it. So there's these slight fragmentations between the capabilities. So it's not as seamless as you thought it would be.
Yeah. I think what they're trying to, I can see what they're trying to do. It's what every good sort of software company does, try and keep everyone on your platform. But I think it's made it all a little bit clunky in a lot of ways. And with this Search GPT, it's kind of buried, isn't it? It's this little globe, and then you've got to click on it. And I think whilst it's good that everything's on one platform, it gets a bit confusing. For instance, with the canvas, I'm never sure how to get the canvas up. At what point does it pop up? And then with this Search GPT now, I've found myself a few times saying, well, I'm doing this prompt. Is this a normal traditional prompt, or is this search? And where's the line between the two?
Exactly. It's blurred. It's not as explicit or easy to understand. But I mean, looking at some of the features and having used it, myself quite extensively over the past week or so, is I've noticed it's instant. It's very quick in comparison to the likes of Perplexity and Google. It's very quick. It's quite basic though in that sense. So the response you'll get back is conversational, is what it wants it to be. But I guess simplicity is key. It has got an ad-free browsing experience. I know Perplexity were toying with having ads. Google does have ads. The source linkages are quite good. It's all inline. It's clear cut to see where the sources are coming from. But what I would say about the sources is, unlike Perplexity, which uses web indexing, right? So it crawls through the sites, it uses different techniques. OpenAI have actually collaborated, or they've partnered with different publishers, right? So you've got, I think it was Hearst, Axel, Springer, and News Corps. And what that means is that these partnerships grant the media companies more control over what appears and how it appears, but also does ChatGPT then prioritize their content. So there's a level of curation which is not as agnostic or, I guess, objective from what we see from Perplexity. And I guess to some extent, Google,
is it more prone to bias?
We don't know because it's too early to tell, but I would say it can be more prone to bias. However, because of the model underpinning it, so just to give some insight into this now, so it uses the GPT-4 engine, but they also mention, it uses some outputs from the O1 model. Now, what this means is, and where it has a leg up on the likes of Perplexity, is that it has a less propensity to hallucinate. So it's actually more rigorous answers. But Perplexity, on the other hand, gives you a lot more of a structured, more thought out, think around the context sort of answer with good, excellent formatting. ChatGPT is very quick, to the point, will give you within a paragraph, personalized to you. So there are pros and cons of both. Now, I've not mentioned Google as much because Google is quite basic at the moment in terms of its capability and its AI or Gen AI capabilities in the search functionality. But, time will tell with that one.
Yeah, to be honest, I've still found myself using Perplexity because I find the answers a little bit more thorough. Mm-hmm. And what I quite like about the Perplexity interface is the follow-up question. So what it does, for those who haven't used it before, you ask a question, but it will come up with a bunch of commonly asked follow-on questions. And I think that's really cool because it will come up with a follow-on question that I might not have thought about. I don't think the OpenAI model does that yet. But you're right, it's horses for courses, isn't it? And like we've always said on this show, you don't have to pick one model and stick with it. You can use different things for different use cases. And I think, these different search features are going to be exactly the same. Sometimes you'll use the ChatGPT Search, sometimes you use Perplexity. And I won't exclude one over the other just because you don't have to get into a camp and say, I'm OpenAI.
Yeah, I think this is another key thing. So Perplexity, one thing they also have is this ability to filter the sources you want to draw the information from, which ChatGPT hasn't got. But where the search ChatGPT Search will have an advantage, right, is coming in the planned improvements. So we all know when you release something, you do it because you want to get it out to the masses. And we kind of cover this in the news as they're calling it a hotly anticipated release. To me, it's gotten to the point where the heat kind of died down a bit because I was seeing Perplexity, go further ahead and other companies, moving with search functionality. But in looking at some of these planned improvements, they've mentioned improved shopping and travel search options, which, that was quite good at initially with ChatGPT. The integration of the advanced voice mode, which Perplexity hasn't got. So this is where the interoperability of features comes together.
Yeah.
They've mentioned enhanced research tools and then personalized search results. Now, think about this. ChatGPT has personal memory, right? And it remembers your conversations, over time, over conversation. So implementing that level of memory into the search result is what hasn't been done. So it does have, some of these unique selling points that the others don't have. But like you mentioned, James, it's a pick and mix, and you kind of go with what you feel most organically works with you.
Yeah, and as you said, this isn't the end of it either. I saw that Sam Altman, there was some comment they came up with saying that they've got lots of things planned before the end of the year, none of which are GPT-5, whatever that means. But that leads us quite nicely onto the tech story, which is about this Reddit Ask Me Anything session with Sam. And he's quite a charismatic guy, and he came up with some pretty good stuff. Do you just want to sort of summarize some of the big takeaways from that Reddit session?
Yeah, so what we actually did in the newsletter was we covered the 5 key takeaways. What I really like about the AMA or the Ask Me Anything sort of subreddit is that Reddit is a great place to do that, right? Because you get very honest opinions, you get a lot of variety of questions coming towards you. But summarize the 5 key takeaways from us were these following, right? So AGI with today's hardware. Now, this is quite a very good conversational topic to look at because they've mentioned that, they're focused on making architectural and algorithmic advancements to achieve AGI, right? So they're saying they don't have to wait for revolutionary new hardware, which is amazing because it's telling you that there could be more to squeeze out of the current hardware stack at the moment.
Definitely is.
There's that, but then there's also that, the compute challenges are driving them to having to use this now, because where there's a dichotomy or where there's a conflict is when Sam consistently emphasizes the need to scale. We need more infrastructure so we can scale and we can have more compute, etc., etc. So in one way he's saying one thing and then he's also saying another, which is we can still achieve AGI. What this makes you think then is you can infer that maybe his mind is beyond this level of AGI, what we're thinking. People are saying, Anthropic have got, vision-based AGI at the moment with their new computer vision models. So we're near. It seems to be that we're near. So that's one of the different.
And it's what you do with models as well. So we haven't even got to that kind of agentic models that we've spoken about. There's a lot more you can do with actually how we join these models together and what they actually come up with, rather than constantly making bigger and bigger models, right?
Exactly. So that was that, stepping away from making bigger models and being a lot more efficient because you're kind of being a lot more cognizant of the impact that you're having on the environment, but also the ability to conduct and run these models. So the second thing then actually focuses on that. It's that focusing more of a multimodal O series, the O series, O1 and GPT-4 Omni instead of GPT-5. So they're moving away from some of these larger language models is one thing. But the shift towards, multimodal AI for me is actually
just for the listener, what do you mean by multimodal AI?
So different inputs. So you can look at vocal inputs, auditory, image-based, video, and your typical text. It's different types of sensory sort of inputs you can put into a model for it to understand and analyze that and then put forward a complete picture effectively in terms of the insight that you get. So we can analyze various types of data sources or data types even. Now, with this, what it tells me is that they are becoming a lot more of a consumer focused brand, right? As opposed to driving towards, this next level of AGI stuff, they're focusing more on the consumer products. And that's kind of why I think something like Iliad was more focused on, super safe intelligence, AGI, or what do you call it? Super safe intelligence, yeah, artificial intelligence. So that's one thing that I would question, why multimodal over GPT-5? Is it because we aren't there yet, or is it because, they actually want to be more consumer focused?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. All the big companies, they've all got their own little battleground where they're going to be going for. So OpenAI seems to be this kind of, we've got the brute force, we've got the power behind us. We were first on the market. We're just going to put everything into our platform. Then you've got kind of Elon Musk and his model, and he's just using his free speech. Everything's around free speech.
Mm-hmm.
That's his kind of battle plan. And then you've got the Claude, the Anthropic, which is all about safe. They try and play the AI safer, and they've got more sort of guardrails, etc., around it. And then you've got the Meta, well, I think it's quite goes on to another story we're going to cover. And they seem to be sort of looking at ways of, well, they've obviously got the open source, and they seem to be targeting governments, things like that, to get their models in there. So it's interesting that all the companies, even though there's this arms race going on, they've all got a slightly different battle plan.
So with the arms race in mind and a slightly different battle plan in mind, what is the one thing they're all struggling from, regardless?
Compute power.
Right, compute power. So in this subreddit, they actually mentioned that compute power is kind of a form or currency for AI, right? And it lends back to the idea that energy is the one true currency. Is that having this ability to scale your AI effectively and deliver a lot more output is where the big tech companies or the front end models are actually going to have their advantage, right, and kind of skip away from the competition. Now, this has been a big problem. I mean, there's varied techniques into how you can efficiently. Well, what they mentioned here actually was that we need to innovate on how compute is organized and distributed, potentially reshaping the entire infrastructure that supports AI development. Now, I found that really interesting. So I looked at, what are some of the techniques people are doing within compute challenges. So you're getting specialized AI chips. So, the NVIDIA H100 GPUs are designed to accelerate, AI workloads a lot more effectively. Edge computing, running or processing data closer to the source itself. And there's model compression, trimming or pruning some of these models, all of these federated learning, all these different things, right? These are the new techniques that are coming into play. But which of these actually takes a step ahead, I don't know. But this is something that I think is going to be very interesting in terms of the one that get the company which actually manages to put itself in the front and get that step ahead or a few steps ahead will be the one which can solve this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be fascinating. Just looking at a couple of other stories in the newsletter around projects. I mean, I briefly mentioned it, but Meta's strategy seems to be around government, and they're looking at getting their model into a lot of the US government, which I think is quite a sound way of doing it, especially with their open source kind of model. Did you take anything from that, or is that just another kind of wait and see whether they have any success? Because it's one thing saying we're going to get into government, and they're specifically looking at the US government. It's quite difficult and it's quite slow, right, to get into that area.
Yeah, so it can be quite split, but I'd actually spin that angle. The three things that I actually found really interesting in this, right, was the focus on their Q3 results. So in comparison to Google, Meta, the revenue was 40.6 billion, a 19% increase over a year, with a net income of 15.6 billion. Now compare that to Google, the figures are actually quite similar, and this is an open source model. So the idea of it being open source was striking to me. But then I thought, okay, open source within a government organization, like you just said, what are some of the concerns, some of the challenges? Because government can be quite slow, but also with open source models, there's going to be some, I guess, challenges around security and compliance. Right. So the advantages might be, transparency and customization, because it's open source. You can use it for many different use cases, like you mentioned. They're a lot more scalable in that sense of different use cases. They're cost effective for governments as well. We know that we operate on a certain budget. And this is the bit that you'll also like, Jen, because I know you're involved with the hackathons, is with open source models, you can do a lot of community collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't get
that's why it's a good partnership for government. It makes a lot of sense.
They can crowdsource from a developer community. Yeah. And I guess you've not got that vendor dependence where, if when government some government companies do that, there is a big risk or a problem within that. Now, the challenges of that, on the other hand, like I mentioned, would be security compliance. Who manages that? It poses risks to sensitive data, and government haven't always got the best track record with managing, proprietary data in that sense. The maintenance and support is another issue. When you have big companies or proprietary companies, they've got dedicated support teams, etc., etc. And then performance limitations. Even though open source models are great, typically when you look at LMSys, which is a good website to compare models against each other across different benchmarks, is that proprietary models actually tend to perform better because they're naturally bigger. So those are some of the pros and cons with both of them. But I do really like Meta's approach, right? And I think Mark Zuckerberg's got the right philosophy of open source and development now, so everyone can get visibility, transparency, and some of the big tech companies like to learn from that. So Anthropic and OpenAI are leaning and giving visibility into.
Is this all? He seems to have had a real change of sort of personality, and the way that everything from him doing martial arts to the fact that, don't forget the scandal that he had not so long ago in terms of government with the US election back in whenever it was 2017, 2018, and now he's being portrayed as the hero of working with government. And I also wonder whether the result, because we're recording this the day before the US election, whether that's going to have an impact, and whether he will prefer to work with one administration in the US over another. And I suppose the last question is: this just the US? Have they got eyes on other governments? And the UK government will be a whole different proposition to the US government. So,
well, there was also some issue around the EU, wasn't there? I think they had with the alarm bombs where they didn't release it.
Well, I still think it's not available there. And even the next story that we're going to go into, Apple Intelligence, that's not available in the EU. I think you can almost put that to one side for now. I don't think these companies are going to be doing very much at all with the EU, at least for the short term. So just before we go on to the interview with Sri from Rocketlane, I just wanted to talk about Apple Intelligence. I know we've covered it a few times, but I managed to get my first chance to play it. I got... my kids both got an iPhone 16, so it came with the first iteration of Apple Intelligence. Have you managed to play it at all?
No, I wish I could, but I haven't yet.
No, it was not very good. I mean, that's all I wanted to say, really. Yeah, I mean, this is my worry. It's a bit like Copilot, right? When you let these big companies, Apple and Microsoft, take control, they can't be as agile as your OpenAI.
Yes.
And what they've done is they've both rushed out. I found Microsoft Copilot, really hit and miss. It's good for some things, but meeting minutes, really, really bad for others. And I think it's going to be the same with Apple Intelligence. Obviously, with Apple Intelligence, there's only a few features rolled out, but the ones I use are really rubbish. You'll be like, okay, I'm just going to go and use ChatGPT. This is what I find myself doing with Copilot when I try and do something within Word. I'm like, this is rubbish. I just go to Copilot and then copy and paste it in. So I go to ChatGPT and I think it's the same with that. And it feels like, I was talking to someone today, it feels like they've just rushed it out. And the fact that they're releasing it in increments means it's clearly not ready. And my kids said they had the same opinion. It's just rubbish.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to end in a downer, and it's not often that Apple have a misstep, and I'm sure it will get better, but at the moment, pretty bad.
You think it's because they were waiting too long and had to get something in, and you obviously go down the obvious route to brute force AI or Gen AI into every app possible, and then see which gets picked up or not?
I think they just want to say the word AI. I think they waited a long time.
They hate using the word AI, though. It's Apple Intelligence.
Apple Intelligence. Yeah, it's just funny how all these people are approaching things differently.
It's crazy because the Apple, before AI was such a buzzword, they were really good in terms of bioinformatics. They leveraged AI very effectively. So it's the generative AI element which they seem to struggle with. But when they were showcasing a lot of it, it seemed decent. But
Siri's never really been very good, and they're hoping this is going to be. It is a shame because when Apple gets it right, they're untouchable in terms of products and how your user experience and what have you. Absolutely unstoppable. I mean, I'm an Apple user myself, but when they get it wrong, it just makes you feel so frustrated because you know what they're capable of.
If you could click your fingers and have one thing change now to make it better, what would you say?
They've got this integration with ChatGPT, but that only kicks in, after when it needs to sort of go offline, if you like. I think they should just make the integration more rolled up so that it is just using ChatGPT, because you can rely on the output of that a little bit more. Listen, I'm sure it will get better, but the problem is with all these AI solutions is that often you've only got one shot at making an impression. And whilst you and I use it all the time because that's part of what we do, there's other people who will try it once. If it's not a good experience, they won't use it again.
But this is why. When you're open source, you have a bit more leeway.
You
You,
do,
you,
yeah,
you can be
absolutely.
forgiven a bit more if you're open source, like Mark Zuckerberg has been. When
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
proprietary, you
absolutely.
have to deliver something perfect because it's a black box. So I think that's
Yeah,
kind of the difference between the two as well.
absolutely. Well, the only good thing about it, it means that I'm now not sort of itching to go out and buy the latest iPhone. I'll probably
Yeah.
stick with my iPhone 14 for another year. So it saved me a few quid from that
And
perspective.
this podcast is not sponsored by Android.
No, no, it's definitely not. It's all being recorded on Apple products, actually. But on the plus side, the MacBook Pro M4 series has all been released, and I've got my order in. So, but that's not AI specifically. But I'm definitely not an Apple hater. I'm just disappointed in them. So that's it on the catch up. As always, going to go to the newsletter where you can read a heck of a lot more. Do share the newsletter and the podcast. Please go on and give it a like and a review if you can, because it always helps with the algorithm. But without any further ado, I think we're going to go on to the really, really great interview we had with Rocketlane. So unless there's anything else from you, Yoshi, we'll say bye-bye to everyone.
Oh, all good.
Project Flux is here.
Hi, Sri. Welcome to the Project Flux podcast. It's really, really great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on today, James. Happy to be here.
Brilliant, brilliant. Before we get started with some questions, can you just tell everyone about your experience, what led you to forming Rocketlane, and some of your experiences along the way, please?
Sure. Rocketlane is my second venture as founder. Previously built a messaging product from 2012 to 2015 with the same co-founders. And then, that company got acquired in 2015 by Freshworks. Continued to build that business within Freshworks for 4.5 years. So overall, like a 7.5 year journey where we sort of reflected upon what could have been better, what felt broken, etc. at the end of that journey. And one of the areas we identified was client-facing project delivery. It felt like we were using a bunch of tools, cobbling together different experiences. Data was siloed, work was spread across, and we felt there must be a better way to do this. We also saw that there was a lot of anxiety on both sides. Like for leadership on my side, we would have escalations out of nowhere. The customer also felt there was a huge black box. And what I'm talking about is teams running, like vendors, SaaS vendors running implementation projects with their clients, also involving partners in the project. And that's where things got very tricky when it's like work happening across organizations. It wasn't easy to establish the right kind of accountability, right kind of visibility. And we thought there must be a better way to do it. That was where we started. The whole idea of Rocketlane came from there.
That's fantastic. And the fact that you've started a venture from your own pain point, I think that's always a really, really good starting point, because it's actually trying to solve a problem that you were facing. And I think in a lot of ways, what Rocketlane has developed is the holy grail. It's what, looking at it, it's what a lot of people are looking for, this kind of integrated solution, this professional services automation software. That doesn't mean you've got to have loads of different kind of software solutions and stitch them together with sellotape or what have you. So I think it's a real breath of fresh air. But can you tell me about some of the challenges? You've talked about your challenges when you were developing your previous iteration, but some of the challenges that project managers face, maybe due to the lack of real-time data, and the ways in which Rocketlane can maybe address some of these issues.
Sure. I think there's a variety of things that we've identified as problems which teams face today. One is just, I think, we're moving towards a world where there's more, you can say, amateur project managers versus people with a PMP, which also means people don't always raise their hand early and say, hey, I see some risks in this project. They're not flagging issues early enough. So it's hard to catch things when a project is going sideways. You tend to realize things have gone wrong only after it goes south. And that is a big area where we see, the lack of real-time insights and data on, hey, here's a project you need to pay attention to because things are going sideways. Like a early warning system is missing. You can say the same for not just like a schedule based risk, but also, let's say there is scope creep in a project, or the customer sentiment is negative, or the budget usage, because we're talking about uh, projects which are cross company. Oftentimes there is a effort that is budgeted, there is a cost that it's going to take for you to deliver on a project. But if your cost is higher than it should be for a particular stage, if you don't have that real time insight, then it's too late by the time you find that, hey, I've exhausted my budget, but I'm only like 50% done with the project. So
Yeah,
those are a couple of areas that quickly come to mind. But also, I think, it's people updating systems on time is necessary to get access to the right data. And very often, because things are very manual in especially PSA tools, there's project management tools and PSA tools that are existing in silos today.
absolutely. Yeah,
And some of them are from a different era, feel clunky. People don't like to keep them updated on time. So it means you have data that is missing and you're not able to tie data across these two systems and get real time insights across like your project progress and your operational side of things on the PSA. That's where I think Rocketlane is able to help with like tying data together and all.
yeah. And I think for the fact that sometimes you can stitch things together, but then you don't trust the system. I mean, I use a lot of kind of putting things together, two tools, and using some kind of automation to stitch two tools together. But then you never know when it's going to break. And then you end up always with this sense of anxiety because you're never 100% sure whether it's all working together. And actually, what you want from a project management system of any kind is you've got to trust the data. That's the first thing. You've got to trust that what you're putting into it is a trusted system. And then the second bit that you mentioned that I thought was really interesting, Sri, is this kind of real-time data and being able to make data-driven decisions on the fly before the project goes south. Because how many times do people end up in project meetings, for instance, where it's too late to do anything about the issue and you just spend the time arguing about, how late is the project, how over budget is the project, and ultimately, usually, whose fault is it? But that doesn't serve the project, does it? Sort of blaming people. That doesn't help, doesn't get you out of the problem. And actually what you want is a solution, which I think Rocketlane provides, that gets rid of that you can have proper engagement around the project using real-time data, right?
Absolutely. I think finger pointing doesn't serve a purpose. My philosophy, which our team follows, but we also recommend our customers to follow, is that you need to believe that the ball is always in your court. Even if you're waiting on a customer, the ball is still on your court to chase the customer down for the information or the approval or whatever it is you need from them. So with that approach and with something more system driven, it's not about a team member raising their hand anymore. It's the system identifying a risk. It's a system, you've sort of productized your governance, and that is needed for better governance. Otherwise, team members always tend to believe, hey, yes, something slipped this week, but we will make up for it next week. But we know that it only gets worse, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the project that loses 2 months in a month, and you say that's not humanly possible. The project must have been incorrect, or the program must have been incorrect in the first time. But before I go on to the next question, which Yoshi's going to provide, are there certain sectors that are better or worse than others? For instance, is the IT sector better or worse than construction, or do you see the same problems cropping up in different sectors?
I think construction really understands the impact of delays and the dependencies and so on in a very strong way. So I would think that construction in general has better rigor around project management. digital transformation projects, I think there is a lot of back and forth between customers and vendors, and typically things go south because people don't give the right attention, and they don't start off with the right intensity on these projects. Of you think, hey, we have some buffer, we can make up for lost time, we've like budgeted for more time than needed, and before you know it, you've gone through that buffer time, and now everything needs to happen on time, and then you've never scoped out things perfectly enough, so there are evolving changes to requirements that are going to surprise you, surprise the customer, everyone. So I think there's a lot of areas where things can go wrong, and when more areas go wrong, then you have like a downward spiral.
Yeah, it's the old human condition. We always underestimate how long something's going to take, or how much something's going to cost. Over to you,
Absolutely. I
Yoshi.
think, yeah, there's a customer who once asked me, how does a project get delayed? And I was giving all sorts of reasons, and here's how projects typically get delayed. And this wise gentleman said, oh, the answer I really was expecting is it gets delayed one day at a time. The way you prevent projects from going south is by catching those single days of delays early enough in the cycle to figure out, like, how do we make up for this, what is our go green plan from here, and really systematizing how you do your project management so that you're not you know you're not playing it loose early on. You're going in with the right accountability framework so
Yeah,
that everyone
exactly.
knows that you expect that rigor.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a good sort of analogy that's come up a few times now around the way that we utilize sat navs now. When sat navs first came out, it was a means to work out how you're getting from A to B. I use sat navs wherever I go now because it gives you that real time impact on that particular project, which happens to be a journey. And it's telling you in real time your project's going to take slightly longer or slightly less, depending on what's happening on the roads. And I think we should be treating projects in exactly the same way. And I think that the system that you've developed is going to, if used properly, will enable people to do that.
Absolutely. And I think there is a lot of signals that you can be looking at to detect what's happening, what's going to work well, what's not, where are we seeing risks, right? So if you think about the number of Zoom calls that people go on for running their projects, and the number of emails exchanged, number of documents created, you can actually identify risk from all of this, right? If you see that the exec sponsor hasn't joined 3 calls in a row, that's a signal for you to look at and say, hey, something's going south over here. Or if you see that critical milestone is delayed by more than X number of days, then you know that you need to intervene right there, not wait for, hey, overall timeline has changed. Right now, let's figure out what's going south. So there's lots of signals from those calls and emails that you can identify. So I think identifying risk early in an automated fashion is something that people need to be paying attention to.
So, Sri, does Rocketlane manage qualitative and quantitative data within the system?
Absolutely. So there is both aspects to it. Some of it is driven by automation rules that you can set up. Some of it, we have very interesting AI capabilities that we are bringing to the table on listening into calls and watching emails and so on to identify risk as well. Yeah, there's lots of areas where systems like Rocketlane can actually help detect things automatically and surface those warnings and signals to leadership.
Because that was my next question. Because one thing you said stuck out to me, and it was, there is a lack of experienced project managers, which means you don't have that reliance on expertise to be able to get these early warning detection systems. So in this instance, something like AI would be pivotal and key for a lot of people who are delivering the project. So on that basis, then, what sort of AI capability does Rocketlane leverage or deliver even?
Sure. So there's various areas where we're applying AI. As every company is these days, right? Like you need to have your AI strategy moving forward. But I'll share a few areas where we're paying more attention to AI. One is last year we launched AI for resource management. So if there's a new project that you need to staff, who do you need to put on that project? What skills do they need? What experience do they need? Based on all of that, now do I want to optimize for costs on the project? Do I want to optimize for balancing the load on my team? So you figure out how you want to do it, and we will automatically recommend the right team that you can staff on a project. This is more using like ML models.
Yeah.
And then there's of course Gen AI that's come up in a big way over the last
Big
year and a
buzzword.
half. And over there, I think the few ways in which we are seeing how we can create impact for project managers. One is purely the productivity side, right? You're going on calls. Sales teams have like a Gong or Clary or tools like that. But what does a project team have that is purpose built for them to help them with automating creating documents or automating taking minutes of meetings from projects or automating sending out an email after a project, after a call, right? So you sort of look at this concept that we've brought in called AI fills, where you can define custom prompts, and we also come up with some defaults which you can add as fillers or placeholders within emails, within documents. And then you can just say, hey, use this call to fill out this document or this email. And we will automatically flesh out the content, then you edit it and send it out. So
Brilliant.
that's on the productivity side. But similar things can be done on an account risk identification side, an account opportunity identification side. So from all these calls and emails that are being exchanged, we can surface problems, we can look for those signals. All of that is again Gen AI based capabilities. So there's looking at sentiment, there is looking at account level risks, there's looking at what can I proactively suggest to a team member as an action based on what's happening. And then there is governance. You're looking at a kickoff call and you're able to say, here are the 5 things that should happen on every kickoff call. By the way, Yoshi, you're not doing these 2, right? So you're sort of able to point out what are the compliance problems with respect to here's our playbook versus here's what we end up doing.
And I guess you can relate that. Sorry, Jim. I guess you can relate that to the resource management aspect. So my question then to you would be: is how personalized do you go to the user in terms of the AI insights you provide?
So some of this is still work in progress, right? But definitely, I think on a call by call basis, there are insights that you can have. And then for a project, you can derive insights saying, hey, here's the 5 calls that we did. What have we learned from all of them? What can we surface to leadership that, hey, here's like the pattern we're seeing. Here's the list of issues that have come up for this customer over a period of time. Here is, the opportunities we see with this account, etc. Then across projects for the same account, what can we glean from the data, from the conversations? So there's a lot that you can do at every level. From this person on all the calls they go on, they're not setting next steps. That's an insight on a very personal level,
Right.
to accounts and so on.
I mean, we talk a lot on the show about the advances in the various AI technologies, and obviously Gen AI is a big topical conversation at the moment because it's all the hype. But where are you on the future? Are you excited about the future, or do you think it's all overblown?
I'm very excited about the future. I think there can be real productivity gains, real like insights that you can gain as a company. And I look forward to using a lot of it in our company as well, both on the sales side, on the development side, on the marketing, everywhere, right? Like I think there's a lot that's happening in every function. I do keep encouraging our team to experiment with what's out there already.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? To dip your toe in the water and experiment. I was at a meeting today and talking about what are the sort of big takeaways to sort of encourage people to start utilizing AI tools And that is the one thing that came up. It's you can talk to people till you're blue in the face about the advantages, but until you ask people to start experimenting and failing and working out, oh, that prompt didn't work and I should be using this. And the other thing that came up, Sri, was I think it's a quote from Sam Altman, who said, don't forget that today is the worst model you will ever use of AI. It's only going to get better. And I think that really sticks with people as well. But having spoken a lot about the kind of the positive and the future and looking about how excited we are, we also know that there's a lot of barriers to adoption, which I kind of alluded to in that sort of opening statement. But what are the strategies that either yourself or other companies can employ to overcome these adoption challenges?
Yeah, I think it's all about change management in a way. Two things come to mind. One is definitely I've seen having a pod of people who are responsible for experimentation, saying, three of you go and experiment. One of your OKRs is to bring new ideas and new things that are working in this function. So in every function, maybe nominate people for each quarter who are going to do experiments, who are going to lead experiments, so that they're actually paying attention to it, they're trying out things, they're learning, bringing back those learnings to the rest of the team. Secondly, I would say find technology that is not completely changing the way of working, but instead introducing AI into your existing workflows, so that trying to make a big change that people are not going to make happen. Instead, you're doing this, there is this automatic pre-filling of information in your place of working already, or there is a suggestion coming to you in a channel that you're already actively paying attention to, let's say a notification on Slack, for example. So get into the workflow of the team so that it's more likely that they will use the information being sent to them or the automations that are trying to aid them, etc. And secondly, put people on it who are responsible for it, who are going to be, their annual appraisal probably is going to take into account that they had some OKRs in this area. Did they actually, deliver on some of that?
Yeah, cool. So Shri, you also, when with big tech, there's a big trajectory where people are saying that big tech will be eating up a lot of the vertical tools that exist within the industry. And Rocketlane itself, I saw in your blog, you mentioned in the future you're looking to go wider and deeper, right? So you're looking to be a bit more horizontal with that sense. How do you navigate the challenges associated with becoming a lot more horizontal in that sense? So, avoiding, bloatware and these sort of issues. Because when I look at ChatGPT at the moment, they've incorporated loads of different functionalities, right? The GPT Search, they've also incorporated Canvas, and they've incorporated it all into ChatGPT. And like you mentioned, implementing into existing workflows, if you use one solution, it's easier then to use all the capabilities. But sometimes it can come across quite fragmented. So how do you navigate that landscape?
Yeah, our belief and our investment is more in doing more for the same team. So someone is using Rocketlane already. What more can we do for them? How can we help them accomplish more within our environment versus having to switch to somewhere else, right? Um, so in that sense, I think if someone is already using us as their system of intelligence, system of record, system of action, to go a little more upstream, downstream, find workflows that we can automate for them, we can own for them, etc., makes it more easy for people to adopt more capabilities versus trying to do more for other functions, right? So today we work with post-sale teams that are delivering on projects for clients, and that's the intent, to do more for them, and sort of become more all-encompassing for that team.
So it's a bit like land and expand almost.
That's right.
Cool. And just another question, more focused around risk management and compliance then. So what role does the AI within Rocketlane play within, your PSA software?
Yeah. So I think even minus of AI, there is automations that I think are playing a big role today in that risk management and governance side, where we have this whole framework in our automation engine for early warning systems and for proactive governance and an escalation metrics, etc. Now with AI, all of this only gets better because the amount of effort to set up an early warning can be more like, hey, here's the kind of projects we run. Turn on these kinds of early warnings for me versus having to go in and configure everything by hand. So it's gonna automate a bunch over there. But I think also what we look at for the signals is wider now, right? Before AI versus after AI. Before it was more of the data that's already in the system, the project timelines, the actions happening in the system, etc. Now it can also be actions that are happening outside, or it can be content that is being fetched from call transcripts and emails and so on, which can be used for this governance system. And I think from a compliance standpoint, what I mentioned before, the whole here is our playbook for how we want to run projects, how we want to run certain kinds of meetings, what needs to happen based on what's happening in those meetings or the risks that are identified, and then suggesting to our teams, here are the things you need to do, but also flagging, here's the things that haven't happened yet, so that both the individuals and leaders know what problems need to be fixed.
Awesome.
Just moving on to, can't believe it, we're almost already running out of time, Sri. So I've just got time for one more question, which is about the human oversight. And one thing that often comes up when I'm speaking to people about artificial intelligence or artificial intelligence aided solutions is the fear of handing over decisions to AI. And I think that's partly a technical kind of resistance, and it's partly a cultural thing, i.e., how dare a machine sort of say it knows better than me. And there was a really interesting report that Yoshi and I covered before from the London Property Agency. And they talked about this concept of bookending. I don't know if you've heard of this before, which is human at the beginning, sort of setting the prompt and setting the parameters, algorithm in the middle, and then human at the end always checking. So creating this bookend to make sure that what's going in and coming out of an AI system is safe. So with Rocketlane, how does that kind of balance that AI automation and all the enormous benefits you get from AI automation, but with that human oversight as well?
So I think we are on the same page as this research report you're talking about, or approach you're talking about, where for most things it's good to have the human confirm what AI has recommended or AI has sort of crafted on your behalf. Getting more productive doesn't mean just using some automation and sending out something without checking it or without adding your 2 cents to it, because the context is finally more in your head. You need to validate what output AI is spitting out there for you. And likewise, I think initial setting context, or like setting up what even needs to be automated in what way, some of those rules need to come from humans to start with. And I feel there are areas where AI can go on and do its own thing, and as long as everyone knows it is AI doing the thing. For example, let's say in projects you need people to nag each other a little to get work done often. So does that need to be done by a human, or can that be done in a nice way using AI? Probably AI can do it. Maybe sometimes AI will miss the context of, hey, we already discussed that this can't happen on this date, but it's okay for AI to do that follow up and then hear back from someone and no, we had actually changed the dates, and then it can come and confirm with the project manager saying, should we change the dates on this project? So there can be areas where you just depend on AI to let it loose and do its thing.
Yeah,
But
where it's not going to cause too much problems.
yeah,
I think where it becomes more of an agent, and we know we're getting into that area, making crucial decisions on projects, that's where at the moment we still need to have human oversight. But I'm also guessing that over time, people are going to get more comfortable with the idea of AI making decisions. Now, we're going down that route already. We know we're going to have self-driving cars soon, which effectively will be making decisions. And in some senses, you take the iPhone that we use. Now, none of us are sitting here saying, well, I need to know how it all works and how it, very few people will know how everything works in the back end, but we're all comfortable using it. And I think we'll probably get to that point sooner rather than later in this kind of AI journey where they start having better experiences with AI and they learn to trust it.
Absolutely. I'm already trusting my car to do most of the driving, so I can see.
Well, I can promise you the self-driving car will be better than my driving. But Sri, just before we sort of log off, it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. And, having looked at Rocketlane myself, it's something that I will be trialing myself because it looks right up my street in terms of the kind of things that we need to do to manage projects. But where can the listener find out a little bit more about Rocketlane? And if they wanted to try it out, is there a way they can trial it?
Yeah, you just head to rocketlane.com. There is a free trial, there is a demo, both of which is available. So you can either sign up for a demo, so someone on our team is actually helping walk you through things, or you can just get into that free trial and start playing around yourself. I'm at sri@rocketlane.com if you want to drop a line to me as well.
And we will put the link to the Rocketlane website in the show notes as well. So if anyone wants to have a look, you can follow that. And we'll also be putting it in our newsletter next week too, because we have an accompanying newsletter to the podcast. So we always let the guest have the last word on the show, Sri. So if there's anything that we haven't covered or anything else you'd like kind of to part with, then now's your chance.
No, I think maybe the only last input from me for teams is, take that experimentation on, right? We keep hearing every other day about it's not AI taking your job, but it's about people who are using AI getting more better opportunities versus people who don't use AI. So whether or not your company is investing in tech, it may be worthwhile for individuals to just get their own account for ChatGPT or whatever else, Claude or whatever else you want to try. Spend some money from your own pocket as well, but get that experience and start trying things using the latest and greatest.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And I actually give the same advice to people myself. Is like, just try it out on a personal project. It might be a refurbishment that you're doing at home or a holiday that you're planning. And that's the best way you can sort of dip your toe in the water and find out what this is all about. So that's really good advice. And it really is a pleasure to have you on. We do hope that you'll come back on again because we like to get people back on after a period of time to talk about progress. And we'll be watching with interest where Rocketlane going. But in the meantime, Sri, thank you so much for coming on.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, folks, for the opportunity.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.
See you later, everyone.